Do, do, do. Hey, Mike, guess what?
What's going on?
We're back.
Oh, dear. Are we on the air?
That's the question that the tens and tens of listeners have been asking, Mike. Are we on air? Yes. Yes, we're back. There's a party. Isn't there?
Well, as the 9th best team-specific podcast out there, I would say that we are indeed back.
In the southern counties, however, I hear we're 7th.
We're 7th.
Well, welcome back to the EHC the Podcast. This is podcast number 50, I don't know, 50-something, 53. Might as well be number 1. Mike and I are back. We apologize about the month or so we've been off. Lots of busy times for both of us. We will try to make time to make this a little bit more consistent, but we picked a great time to come back. The Cleveland Indians are in first place as we speak, and actually by the time this airs, we'll still be in first place regardless of what happens tonight. 2.5 games in front of Kansas City. The best part about this is it's the first time the Indians have been in first place since opening day 2014. For those counting at home, that's two years ago, plus a month and a half, 2 months. That's the first time we've been in first place this late in a season since July of 2013. And the best part about it is I don't think Mike or I are surprised in the least. Mike, are you surprised they're in first place?
Not at all. Well, okay. Caveat. But really, I thought that this was a team that should win the division and was clearly the most talented and deepest team in the division. But I didn't necessarily think they'd be in first place with the Brantley and Carrasco injuries. If you had told me that they would miss the amount of time they had at this point in the season, the Indians would be commanding in the Central, I'd probably be surprised. But from the outset, this is a really talented roster in a pretty flawed division. So, I don't know.
Well, I think the balance to the injuries that the Indians have had, and they were substantial and still are substantial injuries, is that you have Kansas City, who clearly is our, a World Series champions, giving them all the respect that they deserve as being the defending champs. They're running into injury issues, at least as concerning as ours. And then you've got a variety of, you've got the Detroits and their, conglomerate of problems that they've been having since they were good, which was 2 years ago. They're still struggling. And then you've got the White Sox still trying to figure out who they are at this point in the season, past their pitching staff. And then the Twins are the Twins. The only team they can beat are the Indians. So, as you mentioned, it's a flawed division. And I think, of all seasons, this is the year where we can counter injury, our own injuries in 2 ways. One, we've got a 25-man roster that's really interesting to talk about, and we're going to do that in a second. We also have, as you mentioned, that flawed division where I think we can tread water for a while, but we're not doing that, which is the best part about this. And it all starts, Mike, with that starting rotation. I don't know if it's quite the vision we had at the beginning of the year, and we of course did a podcast talking about the rotation quite extensively. And right now we've got Josh Tomlin almost acing up with the top 3. You've got Danny Salazar, who I think unquestionably right now, numbers-wise, is the guy kind of at the top of the staff. And we'll get into his shoulder fatigue here in a second. You've got Kluber looking like Kluber. You've got, Carrasco, who had the injury problems, coming back and looking pretty good. And then you've got Trevor Bauer, who all of the sudden, Mike, and I want to start with him. The easy start here would be Tomlin, but I want to start with Bauer because, honestly, as surprising as Tomlin's been, I think for most people, Bauer is equally surprising just for the simple fact that Tomlin and Anderson beat him into the rotation. Bauer starts in the bullpen, and we made some kind of interesting kind of allusions to Carrasco. Maybe they're trying to teach him a lesson. I don't really think they were trying to teach him a lesson. But Bauer gets onto this starting rotation, and in his last start, showcased exactly what we traded for. But my question to you, Mike, is, one, is Trevor Bauer for real? And two, is this something that we're going to – is this icing on this cake? Is this the kind of part that is going to take the Indians from a pretty good team who can win the Central and maybe make a little bit of noise in the playoffs because of the rotation to a team who can legitimately be a top 3 or 4 contender for the World Series?
Yeah, I mean,
how about that? How about that for a bold statement coming out of the gate after being gone for a month and a half?
Cheapers. No, I don't, he just adds so much depth to the rotation. And, I think this is an alignment, and that's fantastic because you have guys in Clevenger and Bauer and Anderson, and all to varying degrees. Bauer clearly with the best arsenal, but, you have these 3 guys with really good arsenals and upsides. And you really only needed one of them to sort of, hit in order to, make an elite big league rotation. And, I'm really glad Bauer has sort of figured it out. And I think he's absolutely for real for a couple of different reasons. He seems to really have changed his approach to pitching. He's not throwing as many high fastballs. He's throwing the 2-seamer a lot more than the 4-seamer up. And the 2-seamer is great because it's inducing tons of ground balls. And it turns out that if you get ground balls in front of a Francisco Lindor-led infield defense, that's really good for run prevention. So, in that way, Bauer's really made this incredible transition. He's commanding it a little better. It's a really good pitch. And he's made an arsenal change that's really, really paid off. And I think it could be due to the bullpen transition, or it could just be due to him making a change. But, both sort of strategically and usage-wise, he's really adapted. And I think this Trevor Bauer is for real. The sort of sub 4 ERA, sub 4 FIP, maybe 390 FIP, 390 ERA. That's a really good fifth starter, and I definitely buy in.
Well, and here's the thing. You talk about the bullpen, and maybe that was the transition for him. But the reality is well, maybe there was a slight control issue in spring training. I mean, this really is the guy we saw in spring training, and I think you can maybe point to the control issues in spring as him just kind of tinkering with things, as we know he'll do. I mean, honestly, Mike, this is the guy we saw in spring. He was arguably their best spring pitcher, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was really good. I think it was – I certainly was shocked when he was moved to the bullpen, and I think that happened for many reasons. I think it happened because Cody Anderson is a tireless worker and someone who busted his butt to get a rotation spot and was really solid in 2015. And definitely hats off to that. Those are things that I don't dislike the Indians considering. But I think it was pretty shocking when they moved to the bullpen. But, you and I talked about this in March, and we said, look, Trevor Bauer can start in the bullpen, but that doesn't really matter because he's still probably going to start 20-plus games this year. And they're going to need him. And they do, and he's good. And that's been phenomenal.
You mentioned, and I do, you mentioned the 4-seam, Bauer moving away from the 4-seamer to the 2-seamer. I know a guy who did that. Do you know a guy I know a guy who did that, and he was pretty good for doing that. This Kluber guy, I mean, do you see a connection here? I mean, Mike, we've been talking for 3 years about this rotation and about how they, I guess for a lack of a better term, they kind of overlap each other. And, in 2013, we saw a scenario where we saw McAllister step up for a little bit. We saw Kluber step up for a little bit. We saw Kazmir step up for a little bit. We saw Salazar step up for a little bit, and we saw Jimenez step up for a little bit, and they kind of interlapped and they kind of worked together and they kind of dominoed into each other. And I think since that point, you can argue that that's been happening over and over again. And the guy that they keep pointing to isn't Mickey Callaway, it's Corey Kluber. And to some extent, maybe as kind of a guru-esque kind of guy, Bauer himself, who Salazar has kind of turned to this year. Do you see that kind of being the case as maybe Kluber, while he's not maybe – well, and I don't want to get into the term ace. I think you really can throw that around with this rotation. But as far as this staff goes, and this isn't taking anything away from Callaway, do you think that this is some Kluber influence, that these rotational guys are staring at Kluber, at what the transformation he made in 2012 into 2013 is perhaps maybe a model to follow, especially a guy like Bauer, who seems to sort of be following that same sort of pitch selection route?
I definitely think so. I think it's you're seeing Danny Salazar, who's getting up to like 20% usage of that sinker two-seamer he throws, and you're seeing Trevor Bauer, who's also spiking that usage. And I don't think this is a coincidence, for a couple of reasons. I think, it could involve Kluber and Callaway. And I think it also just, if you were going to, just beg for an outcome for these guys, it's to get a bunch of ground balls. And the two-seamer is really advantageous for that. And it's been phenomenal. I love it. They've made this transition to one of the most ground ball heavy staffs in baseball, and they do it in front of Lindor, Uribe, who's still a competent defender, Kipnis, who's looked pretty good this year. I think it makes tons of sense. And
Napoli is an actual fielder. Like he, I hate to use the eye test, and I think the metrics probably, but he can field. Like there's no question at 34, he's not Nick Swisher at first base. Like this is a guy who can field, who makes good plays, and has an IQ. And I hate using that, and it's always going to come up on every podcast. But this infield seems to dictate play, and by that I mean they almost have a playbook at this point, where we've seen time and time again this year. We saw Jose Ramirez with a play this week, getting the ball flip from Lindor, throwing it to first. We saw that fantastic gun from Gomes to Napoli earlier in the year against Detroit. This is a high IQ driven, not only talented defensively, but a high IQ driven infield as well that kind of drives that whole defense.
Yeah, I love, Lindor is he's so savvy. I mean, the Lindor Ramirez play, first of all, it really just makes you beg for the day when Jason Kipnis is no longer the starting second baseman for the Cleveland Indians. And I know that's like hot take central, and I can just get shredded for that.
But but seriously, I don't think anybody's going to listen to that. And 2 years ago, 1 year ago, 2 months ago, we get flamed for that. But I think you're seeing Ramirez step up defensively in a lot of different ways. I'm not saying, again, let's avoid the outfield for a second, but he clearly can play third base. I don't care what anyone says, he can play shortstop. And he's a great second baseman. And these two work well together, whether one's at third, one's at short, whether they're shifting over. I'm sorry, I interrupted, Mike. I'm sorry. It's been a long time. I want to stop talking now and let you finish. Sorry.
No. I mean, I want to jump in on that train too, but I think the deal is, Kipnis is a guy who's never defended second base at above average, like maybe a tick above when he's having a really good season. And really credit to the guy to moving to second out of college and putting up average defense there. I don't want to knock that because that's an impressive feat. But to me, the really odd thing about the Indians is you have Kipnis, who is a college outfielder, and you have Ramirez, who didn't play the outfield, and you have Ramirez, who's a plus defender at second. And we're watching Ramirez in left get a little lost. I know the numbers look good on him, but honestly, I don't totally buy them. And, he could be a plus defender at second. You could have your second base and shortstop for the next 6 years playing side by side. And you can put Kipnis in the outfield. And, I think that probably protects Kipnis' body, which really, he does, I don't really buy into his body holding up that much longer anyway. And the Indians have a lot of money left on that deal, which worries me. But, I think Kipnis is outstanding still, but I would totally make that flip in a second and not worry about it.
Well, first base to me is going to be an interesting position in the coming years. I have to imagine, Napoli's a guy they're going to look at for next year, and we're getting way too far ahead of ourselves. But I still think, and I wrote this piece last year, I still think Kipnis could be a viable option at first base should the Indians decide to go that route. If he can certainly manage second base, I don't think it would be a stretch to see him play first. But I digress. Jose Ramirez. Let me back up here for a second and go back to the rotation really quick. So, obviously the depth is there. I'm not sure that Anderson or Clevenger are guys that this year are going to make too much of an impact. But what they have already showcased, Mike, is that there's the depth for when we need a start, or if somebody goes down, we have a guy who can step up. We predicated this. We said if somebody went down long term, we'd see Clevenger. Sure enough, Clevenger has been up. They gave him the ball, I want to say 3 times. I don't know, 2 or 3 starts. He's obviously got upside. He's obviously not quite there yet. Although I think throughout this year, it'll be interesting to see how he progresses now that he knows what he's getting himself into. So let's talk. I want to talk about Salazar's shoulder. And I only want to talk about it, and I'm going to segue into Brantley here in a second. But so Carrasco goes down. We have a bunch of guys kind of overlap. The rest of the rotation kind of steps up. We've got shoulder fatigue with Salazar. He misses a start. If you read my piece that I wrote yesterday, I don't really think there's much to the shoulder fatigue, if anything. I think they're just buying him some time and maybe resting him up as they have done every single year of his career. But if injuries continue to kind of nip and tuck at this rotation, Mike, is this rotation built to handle it? And better yet, we were talking a little bit off air about the bullpen, and it's clear that this bullpen is highly dependent on the rotation being solid. If we keep running into these minor to major-ish injuries, are the Indians built to contend this year? Or is this something that we really have to keep our eye on? Because while we have depth, I don't know, do we have playoff contention depth with that bullpen being as inconsistent as it's been in support of the rotation?
Yeah, I guess first I would say definitely read Jim's piece where he really, I think, went into great detail on Salazar and sort of how they've handled him and the risk with Salazar. I don't know. I think the question has a clear answer in that, they've sustained this and they've been really impressive, but I like their depth a lot, but I just don't think there's a team in baseball that can sustain missing time from one of their 3 best position players and 2 of the 20 best pitchers in baseball. I just, and I would hate to see that happen because, I think I could see this front office getting torched for not putting a team out there that can contend when, if any team in baseball can adapt to losing 3 of their 5 best players for significant chunks of time, BS. Like that doesn't happen. This is a game where that's really hard to do. And I'm really hopeful that Salazar will stay on the mound. It's been a Cy Young caliber season so far. But, I don't think they're built to sort of withstand him missing like 2 months. I don't think they can hold up. I
gotta tell you, writing that piece, we've all kind of been on board the Salazar train from the start, but I got to see it's rare you kind of get to see the start at High A Carolina. And he really started there after his Tommy John surgery and the way they've handled him over the years. And I really think this is a vacation for him. Nothing more, nothing less. But it's been fun watching, as I wrote that piece, Mike, how he has developed from that 2012 season all the way up till now as a pitcher, not just a guy who can throw 100 miles per hour. It's been a kind of a joy over the past 3 years to watch him turn into this very kind of analytical pitcher where he's literally sitting down with Bauer and working on location. He's working on release points. He's working on all kinds of different pitches. Are we seeing, and gosh, I hate to say this, and I'm not trying to hot take or anything, but are we seeing kind of a transcendental pitcher? There's never been a moment since I've seen him where I didn't think that he was special. And I know a lot of people say that about Lindor. I've always said it about Salazar. And on this rotation, it's saying a lot, but I really think there's something different about Salazar, even compared to a lot of the guys on this staff right now. Are we just starting to see the tips of that right now, Mike, where, he's 26. I mean, this is a kid who there's so much upside there. I'm not going to throw names out there, but we've seen other really good starters really take off at that age 26 year. Are we seeing the beginning of what could be one of those really great starters in the American League? And I'm not, I'm not trying to jump off a cliff here, just based on progression, just body of work. You know how big I am with body of work. If you look at his body of work and you look at the ladder he's climbed, it really seems like he's higher than a lot of other pitchers that we've seen come and go over the years.
Yeah, I mean, who strikes out like 10 plus per nine and gets 50% ground balls? Nobody does that.
Did we ever think he would do that?
You know, I think the crazy transition to me has been his like going from like 35 to 37% ground balls to 50% ground balls. And I know like this sounds really boring to people and I harp on ground balls versus fly balls and like annoying contact stuff, but like I'll explain for two reasons. The first is that I think it's really well suited to the Indians defense, which we talked about before. And second, you know, the more fly balls you have, if you have a stable fly ball, you know, home run per fly ball percentage, then the more home runs you allow, the more extra base hits you allow. There are far more extra base hits on fly balls than there are ground balls. Simple conclusion, but you know, that's something that had really plagued Salazar early in his career. I think he's someone who gave up more home runs than we expected. So he sort of curtailed that by getting more ground balls. The last step, his walk rate's a little scary right now. You know, that's the sort of the last thing that's between him and being one of the, you know, like 3 to 5 best pitchers in baseball. That's the last. That's the last threshold.
The odd thing about that though is, you know, he's had a couple of really high walk games where he's been excessively efficient in pitch count, and which I think the day he had 5 Ks or 5 walks, I want to say his pitch count was still under 100. I don't know. I think, I don't know. It'll be fun to kind of watch that develop. His K rate's high. His walk rate's almost to 5. I don't know. We could pull Jay Crawford into this, but I'll kind of stay out of that. I'm just going to leave it alone. I don't know. I think when you work on Arsenal, and, you know, we've talked about this at length with a lot of the starters, especially, you know, a guy like Cody Anderson. When you start changing that Arsenal, I think there's this rubber band snap that we're still waiting for with Salazar. And the interesting thing is he's throwing his way, pitching his way through it. And I don't know. We'll see where this goes. Hopefully this shoulder fatigue is just that. But I've had a lot of fun watching him this year, and hopefully it continues, and hopefully it starts this Sunday. Corey Kluber, just real quick on Corey Kluber. Any concerns with Kluber? You have been kind of at the forefront of this, Mike, where you know you've pinpointed the fact that Kluber had a special season in the Cy Young year, had a really good season last year that was kind of shrouded in traditional statistics. Still finished 9th in Cy Young, which still surprises a lot of people. That's kind of where he is right now, right, Mike? And like I said, he's a really good pitcher. He's just not the guy from 2 years ago, at least not yet.
Yeah, you know, gosh, I think the problem, Kluber, he just got it. He got there too late. You know, I think he peaked really sort of later in his career than a lot of guys do. You know, he's in his 30s now. He peaked, you know, late 20s. So I think, you know, I'd love to see him adapt and make changes, but it's like, gosh, you made your points, like my points, better for me than I'm going to make them, which just makes this an entire response so challenging for me, Jim. It's really tough.
You've been saying it really for a year now, but I guess at the end of all this, does he just have comparison problems? You know, he's really elite pitcher. The problem is, you know, on one side of him, he's got Carrasco. On the other side of him, he's got Salazar. Now, all of a sudden, you've got Bauer and then Tomlin to round it out. Which one of these guys that doesn't belong here is really Kluber's biggest problem, the fact that he's on one of the most talented staffs in baseball.
Yeah, I think it is. I think, you know, Kluber, I just read, you know, people really don't like Bill Simmons anymore, and that's fine. But I think the Book of Basketball is a really fun read because I think Simmons can really write. And, you know, one of the profiles he does is on Tim Duncan. And he talks about the fact that nobody would really want to read a profile on Tim Duncan because he's just good, but there's nothing that interesting about him. There's nothing that exciting about him. I think we've kind of reached this point with Corey Kluber where he's getting the Tim Duncan treatment. I think, he's not nearly as historically great as Duncan, but Kluber's someone who is incredibly stable, but he's boring as hell. His personality is not particularly exciting. He's not a compelling character. His stuff isn't as flashy as Carrasco or Salazar's. And he has great stuff. He has elite stuff, but Salazar's flashing in the high 90s with a beautiful splitter, striking out tons of dudes. And Carrasco is really just kind of a joy to watch on the mound. I think, his command I enjoy, and I think Carrasco shows more pure joy on the mound than any of them, and who's someone I like to watch pitch. So I think it's tough. And then you pair that with the fact that he had one of the, 10 best pitching seasons in the last 10 years that he's not going to match again. And we've just sort of lost our ability to appreciate how good Corey Kluber is.
Yeah, well, as I talk about that overlap of that domino, I think if I ask you this one simple question, does San Antonio win multiple titles, any titles, if Tim Duncan isn't part of that team? I think I know your answer. So and I'm not, again, I'm not talking titles here with the Indians yet. I'm just saying, how much of this progression with Carrasco, this progression with Salazar, and not, and again, if you move past the numbers, I think you can safely say that Carrasco is a different guy than he was 3 years ago, where we were talking about a headhunter and we were talking about a head case. Salazar, ran into some trouble at the beginning of spring training last year, whatever that was, has showcased kind of an anger to his game that he's kind of reined in. I don't even need to get into Trevor Bauer. We can talk about that until the cows come home. I don't know how much he's changed, but obviously Arsenal-wise, he's utilizing his pitches differently. Could you say, Mike, that he, again, kind of coming full circle with the rotation before we move to the position players, do you think that, he is that stabilizing force with this rotation, that as long as there's a Corey Kluber, this rotation can continue to develop and to the point where you've got 3 or 4, maybe even 5 guys who can carry their own weight?
Yeah, I really think there's something to him being the bell cow. There's something in terms of not placing a ton of pressure on Salazar and Carrasco, and even especially Bauer, because good Lord, we don't want to see that. But yeah, I think he's tremendous in terms of stabilizing the rotation. And I think there are some guys who couldn't really handle, the last 2 years, this year and last year. He's had sort of fluky starts where his peripherals look way better than his ERA in the early going. He gets hung in a 7th inning 1 or 2 many times where he's out of gas. He gets lit up, and I think his sort of steady, stable demeanor has been really, useful for him stabilizing and for the team stabilizing in the early going. So it can't be discounted. And I think it's tough. We're in a tough spot where, if you're going to pay to go to an Indians game right now, and I know people don't pay to go see starting pitchers, but Danny Salazar is a special event for me. He's someone where this apex is so fun. He's gassing dudes. He's striking out 11 per 9. To me, he's must-see television. Carrasco is the same way. And I think Bauer in his, I love watching each of these dudes pitch. And for some reason, I don't know what it is. I love watching Tomlin pitch because I think he's just so different. He's something that's so separate from the staff in terms of being an artist who's constantly moving the baseball. And he's fun. And Bauer with his eccentric head turns and his fist pumps from the nerdy-looking engineering dude who's somehow throwing 95. That's a lot of fun. And I think there's something in me where, Kluber's, the least exciting guy for me to watch pitch. And he's really, really good. And that's just sort of a weird reality to live in.
Well, thank goodness for the rotation, because we're not going to get too much into the bullpen today, if at all, but they bought that bullpen some time, and we'll see where it goes as we progress. I've got a piece in the works for the bullpen coming up here in a week or so. So be on the lookout for that, my next actual corner of Carnegie. But I want to talk about 2 guys, Mike, One, I'm going to talk about because it's our podcast, and we always talk about him because he's awesome, and now he actually is awesome, so people can shut up. The other guy is a guy I hate talking about. Hate talking about him more than anything, but I got to eat some crow. So we're going to start there.
Lonnie Chisenhall.
What the hell is going on with Lonnie Chisenhall? Okay, first and foremost, let me just say this. One, defensively, we're now at the fourth month of him playing pretty exceptional defense in right. And whether the metrics show it or not, I don't know if they do. He clearly can play right field. Offensively, we're clearly in one of those hot times for him. He looks good at the plate. A lot of people talking about garbage at bats and him taking advantage of them. I say I don't care. Do whatever it takes to stay hitting good. How big has Lonnie Chisenhall solidifying the outfield been with a guy like Brantley in that shoulder, which we'll still get to, being out for an undetermined amount of time? I mean, this is a pretty big deal, isn't it?
It's crazy. I mean, I always thought he was better offensively than what we saw in 2015. But, he's been his BABIP makes no sense. It just doesn't make any sense at all. I don't understand it. It fluctuates, but it bears near the xBABIP, which is the expected BABIP based on contact quality. Just seems like his contact quality really fluctuates from year to year, which is crazy, unpredictable, and scary. Really scary. With Bird being gone, it would be. Here's a hot take. With Ramirez in left, who's gotten 1.5 plus WAR, be pretty unlikely that Brantley would outproduce that through this point in the season. So the Indians have lost Brantley from the field and haven't lost any production from left field. And people can argue with that, but I mean, I think you can, if you want to argue they've lost like a quarter of a win, that's fine with me. I'll give that up. But when we were looking at this outfield in April and saying, good Lord, do they have a starting outfielder on this team? I think we can be pretty thankful for where we are right now. And obviously there's, we can't draw any significant conclusions for the future, but I mean, couldn't really get better outcomes from Chisenhall, even Bird when he was around, from Ramirez or Naquin. I mean, could we have gotten a better outcome?
Well, if you go back and listen to our outfield discussion, we do start that discussion off ready to jump into a pit of fire. But if you listen to the second half of that, we do talk about what I'm going to talk about now. And that's these glue players that we've brought in. We haven't even mentioned Rajai Davis yet, who's been, in my eyes, better than what I thought we were going to get for a guy who's playing as much as he's playing. Let me put it to you that way. Naquin is a guy that was barely on our radar. We talked about him not getting a chance. I think we predicated it with he likely won't get a chance, and he's kind of forced his way on. And defensively, maybe he's exactly what we thought, honestly. But offensively, there's a little more. I mean, honestly, Mike, you nailed him offensively. So, but here's my question. You've got, Chisenhall predominantly now playing right, especially with Bird gone. You've got Davis in center. You've got, Naquin in center as well, and Davis playing left. You've got, Jose playing left. I've mentioned all these guys, and I saying them out loud, it's even kind of confounding to me because I there really isn't a starter in the bunch. How long can the team keep winning with these guys? Is this a temporary thing, or is this something that we can live with until Brantley comes back? And then the second part of this is Brantley going to come back?
Yeah, I think Lonnie can hang. I'm pretty I buy into Lonnie big league outfielder. I don't buy into Lonnie important on your team big league outfielder. But when he's the seventh best player on your team, seventh best position player, that's fine. That's a contender. I think that's fine. And I think the same of, Jose is like one of their 5 or 6 best players, and I think he should get more infield time. But
did you just say he's one of the 5 or 6 best players? Sorry.
Oh yeah. But you know what? Jim, he's best if he's a util guy. He really doesn't have the chops to start at the big league level.
And you know what? I'm waiting for the day though, Mike, when they start him every day. I'm waiting for that day. Shout
out Tony Lastoria. We miss you. We miss your hot takes. But anyway, J-Ram's a legit big league starter, and it will happen at some position. And I think probably third base in the nearest future. Although the Yandy Diaz balance is going to be kind of weird, and I think sooner than people expect. But yeah, I don't know.
Wait a second. What the hell are they doing with Yandy Diaz? I mean, he's playing second. Like, what am I missing? Like, everybody's excited about that, and I'm not saying I'm not. I get it. They're trying to get him in games. But what are they like? Okay, I'm sorry. Let's table that. We're tabling the Yandy Diaz conversation. I just want to know what they're doing. We'll get there. Maybe not today. Maybe in our next pod, which we'll do soon. But okay, back to what you're saying. Sorry.
Can we not table that for a second? Because it doesn't make that. I don't want to table it because that makes no sense to me. And here's why. I don't understand where, like, your best big league defender is raking. Your best big league defender at second base is raking offensively. Raking. Like Jose Ramirez, if anybody gets time at second base, it should be.
So wait. So you don't think that at some point Yandy's going to be our second baseman and Jose Ramirez is going to be our third baseman? Wouldn't that make sense? Let's flip.
No, that better not happen. I swear to. So I really don't understand it. I think getting Yandy outfield reps is interesting. I think, maybe if they want to Brock Holt him and make him a super util guy.
But wait, let's see, why do the Indians do this? They did it with Ramirez. Hey, let's put him in the outfield, but never let him play in spring training. They did it with who am I forgetting? They did it with I'm forgetting somebody. But why do the Indians not give guys reps where they're likely going to play? Is this some sort of like fun and games thing for Francona? Is the front office blind? Do they just not plan ahead, which I doubt? Again, I'm just throwing things against it. It makes no sense to me. And I'm sorry, I know everybody on Twitter loves it. Oh, yeah, and he's playing second. Yay! But why? He's never playing in the bigs at second. They got Kipnis there. They got Ramirez there. They're not putting him at second base unless they're going to make him a utility guy, which I guess they might be doing.
Yeah, I think that's like the only sell for him playing second if you're going to turn him into a super util guy. And to me, his offensive profile at third base is like way too interesting to like adapt him to a sort of super util role, especially with the kind of hole we have at third base. I mean, it doesn't matter what you think about Urshela and Uribe. There's no stranglehold. And, even if you buy into Urshela's upside, I think, he hasn't really, made a statement to hold that position down long term. So I think it has to be something where Diaz to me is like probably he's a priority at third to me. Him as a possibility at third is a priority to me. But yeah, I don't understand that at all. I was talking to Jeff when we went to an Indians game, and we always get stuck defending the front office. You, Jeff, me. Definitely you, Jim. You and I always get brutalized for it. And then they do things that seem unbelievably stupid. You have these guys who are, Ivy League educated, and I'm not going to pick on them and do like an us versus them. Let's pick on the smartest guys in the room thing because they're really smart. But these things where like Michael Martinez gets time in center, where Jose Ramirez is the starting left fielder and he's played 20 games out there before. These things are like not things that are based in a good functional process. And I really worry about the Diaz thing. It makes no sense to me. I'm fine with him getting outfield reps. I know he's athletic. And if they want to turn him into a super util, I understand, but it just seems too early to do that. And he's never going to play second. He's never going to start there.
It's confounding to me, these moves and these things that happen. Like, let's talk Brantley here. We haven't really talked about Brantley. And, I think the first thing that we said when we talked about the outfield back in March was they better not bring Brantley back too early. Now, I don't want to I don't want to start pounding on the table here, Mike, because I'm old and I don't want to break a bone. So they brought him back too early, not once, but twice. How does that happen? First of all. Second, it's not like they haven't had history with a star player offensively and a bum shoulder. If I remember correctly, in 2008, there was this guy named Travis Hafner, I mentioned that in my piece, who had a shoulder fatigue and ultimately tried to work through it and sucked through 2008, went on a DL, on and off all year, came back in September, still tried to work through it, ended up going under the knife, and was never any good ever again. Now, we know he struggled a little bit prior to 2008, but haven't they learned their lesson here? This is mostly the same front office, minus Shapiro. You've got a guy in Brantley who obviously they were banking on, as at least offensively in the outfield. Now they're left with this piecemealed outfield and rumblings. Now the front office, in fairness, the front office and Francona have not backed off the fact that he's progressing fine. This is also what they said in April. What the hell is going on with Michael Brantley? And are you worried that Michael Brantley with shoulder problems is a problem going forward? I mean, I hate to prognosticate on a guy, but the Indians are always shrouded like the CIA. You never really know what's going on, and you can only look back on history. And I just can't get Hafner out of my head. This seems similar to me. Does it seem similar to you? Are you worried? Or do you think this time they're just going to sit him until he can? I mean, is this one of those things where we're in first place and he's not coming back until we're not even thinking of him coming back until we need him?
Oh, I'm so worried. I am so concerned. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's really hard not to.
You don't mess with shoulders.
Like
you don't mess with shoulders. Don't mess with them. Sorry.
What do we have? Like 2 years more plus an option on this guy, and not cheap years. And it's really gotten to the point where this is an incredibly concerning situation in terms of the long-term impacts. This is a guy who had sort of finally in the last 2.5 years developed sort of pull field power and a lot more sort of contact authority. And, now we have a major shoulder issue, which probably threatens to sap that and with numerous other effects.
My favorite Twitter comment, by the way, is I don't know who said it, but I saw it today. It just made me shake my head. Well, at least it'll be affordable now. Jesus.
Okay.
It's just the worst. It's just the worst. People want to know where I got everybody hates Cleveland. Just look at Twitter for 5 minutes. It's just mind-numbing. I was talking to a guy today, and I'm sorry I'm going off on a tangent. I was talking to a guy today at my, at the golf course where my son plays. And, he looked at me and he goes, everybody does hate Cleveland. And I looked at him and I said, but I don't hate Cleveland. He goes, and I don't get your name. And I said, it's ironic. And then he just smiled and he goes, yeah, you're right. People in Cleveland hate Cleveland. I'm sick of it. Can't we just have a week of regular, just people enjoying what we've got? We've got a team in the NBA Finals. Just enjoy it. Yeah, they're getting their butts kicked. But for crying out loud, this team sucked 3 years ago. Sucked. They were like the worst team in basketball. Sucked. They drafted Anthony Bennett. Sucked. We got a team in first place. They won 6 in a row, and for crying out loud, all we heard on the internet from Cleveland fans, oh, yeah, well, Kansas City, their best players aren't there. Neither are ours, Michael Brantley. Sorry. I'm sorry. It's been a while, Mike. I got a lot of angst.
I concur with the angst. I really enjoyed it. But here's the thing that's really awkward that I enjoy. I think as a Cleveland fan, I've noticed that it's really odd being a fan of the Indians on a winning streak. And I don't go on Twitter because I don't enjoy it as much. And also I'm super busy, and it's like really nice because I don't really like Indians Twitter. But like Indians Twitter during a win streak, I found to be like almost as bad during a losing streak. Just because we complain about everything, and I don't know, it's whatever. And now I'm like finding a thing because I think it's a lot easier to podcast when I'm really pissed off. Because that happens a lot. I mean, the last couple of years with the Indians have been super frustrating. There have been things that really obviously should have been fixed and weren't. And now we're winning and we're in a really great spot. And I'm just irritated by, what remains of the Twitter Illuminati. That's for another time. I guess. All right, Jim. I'm gonna start driving the conversation. Let's drive the conversation here. About deals. It's like something we love.
I was just thinking about this too.
We talk trades, we look up names, we propose trades over our texts. Like that's what we do.
We throw stuff out. We ought to, like, every time we ought to start writing these down, because we throw these random, we do, and I always forget too. Like, I'll be sitting at work and a name will pop into my head and I'll send it to Mike and it'll sound awesome. And then we never talk about it. Okay, go ahead. I don't know where you're going with this, but maybe I do. I don't know.
Well, I mean, the good thing is that, like, usually we have to, like, talk each other down off the wall because there's always, like, a name and then, like, a proposed package and then, like, a am I crazy question mark text in there. But, the draft is tomorrow. Say what you will, but that's where it really heats up. It heats up after the draft, I think, when, the front offices sort of move past that section of responsibility and move into how do I improve the in-season roster. So where are we going? Is Josh Reddick going to get healthy early enough for us to, go make a move on Josh Reddick? Is it some outfielder that's off the map with 3 years of team control that we're going to give up a significant asset for? Like, what's the way they go? Are they going rental, or are we going, like, member of a 3-year core?
Here's where I struggle, because I know that Chris Antonetti, while as analytical as he is, he has shown a penchant, and I keep going back to that Ubaldo deal, where if he thinks he can make a major deal to change the shape of the team, he'll do it. He made that Ubaldo deal with Shapiro kind of running the show, and obviously he had to swing it by him. And if you could swing it by him, then the ownership was going to go for it. So here we are. Projections have us, certain projections have us as a top 3 team. I don't know about that. I don't know for a top 3 team. I know that we're a top 4 team in the AL. I'll leave it at that. So the question then is, does our front office think that they can make a move that would make us significantly better and that we could contend for a World Series? Now, John Grimm and I had a great conversation where we talked about just the pure numbers of it all. Are we able to get a guy who can shift the tide for the Indians? And traditionally, and you don't have to be an analytical guy to go back in time and say there aren't many guys who have made that big of a difference. So I think, outside looking in, Mike, I don't think this front office is going to swing for the fences. Now, you said something key. Will they look for a guy off the radar, or look for a deal that's not maybe something that people see them making? And, that Ubaldo deal was kind of like a day or two before it happened. It came kind of out of nowhere. That's where I think they're going to go. I think that Antonetti is really successful in finding the Yan Gomes, finding these guys that can shift over a long haul. And my curiosity is, can he find the market and efficiency to find the guy who can shift this team over the short haul? I don't know. Do they look in the mirror and say, we can't beat the Cubs? Why waste bullets if we can't win this year? But then the flip side of it is, what if somebody gets hurt in Chicago? Or what if Chicago isn't the team they think they are? I don't know. I think that if something falls in their lap, I think they make a deal. We've got weapons. We've got bullets. We've got players. The great thing is you could literally look at our top 6 guys and go, yeah, we can give up 3 of those because we have 3 more. So the obvious get would be an outfielder. I just think that they think in the next 5 years they have outfielders to take the place. So do they go outside the box? Do they look at a position of depth and maybe go there? I don't know. I threw a guy. I don't necessarily want Jonathan LaCroix. I threw that name at you, I don't know, a month ago. I'm saying, Trey Gomes, you got Perez, get LaCroix. You can use him in multitude of places. And, there's something outside the box. It's a rental. And we talked about a reliever too, and I can't remember the reliever off the top of my head. And that was really the get for me, was the bullpen guy. I don't know. I think they are going to do something. I just don't know that it's going to be major. I just think that the way this front office works is if there's a big play to be made, they'll make it, but only if they can control it. That's the wild card. It just costs too much. So I think you'll see a bullpen guy. I think it'll be a minor bullpen guy. I don't think they'll go big time unless something falls in their laps last second. What do you think? There are guys out there. I just don't. They're not giving up Frazier. They're not giving up Zimmer. They're not going to give up. But will they give up one of them? Maybe.
I hope they. Yeah, that's whatever. I'll move on from what I was going to say. I'll spit fire some other day.
I'm sorry. I threw out those names on purpose. I ended with that one on purpose because I just want.
So, I think there are a bunch of really interesting financial flexibility is really interesting for this team. I think you have a guy in Jay Bruce, and I know Jensen Lewis thinks that the Reds will ask for Clint Frazier or Brad Zimmer, but I guarantee you they won't because they're not dumb as dirt, unlike Jensen Lewis.
Well, there's asking too, and there's expecting, and I think,
and
yeah, I think the difference. Go ahead with this.
So, sort of thinking that Jay Bruce, is anything more than a salary dump at this point is where we are. Jay Bruce is a guy who is making $12 million this year. He's been horrible for the last 3 years. You're taking a gamble that he's made a significant adjustment, and he's still a big league player. The last 2 years he hasn't really been a big league player in terms of, he can't really play the field anymore. You're acquiring a DH, and that probably doesn't fit. But I think there's a section of guys, Beltran, Bruce, who the Indians can sort of look at, who can be had for a really limited asset and a little bit of salary absorption through the end of the year that can fit well. And I focus on the outfield because I think the Indians' sort of outfield defense is more inconsequential than people think. You need good outfielders, and they're valuable. But this pitching staff is built around ground balls and strikeouts, and so their impact versus the impact of an outfield for another team is super minimal. So I'd like to see, I think it's something like that. I think it's like what you're saying. It's sort of a small veteran deal with a limited asset, and they sort of have to do some cost shifting. But I think that's about all they do.
If it's me, I'm talking to Epstein. I'm talking to Billy Beane. I'm talking to Friedman. I'm talking to these guys who know what we're looking for. I'm talking to guys who talk the same language as we do, and there's a lot more of them than just those 3. But I don't know what our get would be, but I'm talking to those guys. Honestly, I'd probably focus on Oakland, and there's some interesting names there too that nobody are talking about. I'm not super interested in Chris Davis, but I guess there's deals to be had. I think the problem with the Indians is that other front offices understand that when Antonetti finds a guy that fits, and he calls about them, I'm guessing that player becomes significantly more important to that team because nobody wants to get Yan Gomes. He's been so good at that over his tenure. I just don't think that there are a lot of teams that are willing to talk with Chris Antonetti about these fringy players because they think that maybe he sees something that they don't. That being said, there are guys that talk the same language. So I'd be curious to see what happens, maybe with a Tampa Bay. And I haven't even looked at names yet, Mike. But I would hate to see this team come up short because Michael Brantley doesn't come back. That would really upset me. And I don't mean defensively. I mean offensively. It would really upset me if they didn't get into the playoffs or make a move in the playoffs because Michael Brantley isn't 100%. That would piss me off. So percentage-wise, Mike, let's kind of start wrap things up here with our extra large version of our podcast, which has been a long time coming anyways. But percentage chance that the Indians pull a deal between now and July 31st. Let me preface before I let you answer that. A deal for a starter. And when I say starter, I don't mean a pitcher. A deal for somebody who gets significant playing time.
I'd say like 35, 40%.
That's actually high. I mean, I'm going to go lower. I'm going to go 10%. 10%. Okay. If everything stands where it's at right now, I'm going to go 10%. And if they do it, it's going to be someone we're not talking about.
Here's my counter. What are the odds the Indians make a deal for a relief pitcher between now and the deadline?
I would say if Salazar is healthy, and I believe he is, I'd say 40%. If Salazar continues to need a break here and there, I would say 99.5%. Who would have thought, Mike, that Trevor Bauer moving to the rotation was going to decimate our bullpen?
Yeah, Trevor. Oh, Trevor.
Oh, wait till you see my piece. You know some of it.
Perfect Trevor.
You know some of it. I think I said it before the 10 strikeout performance, but I'm still going with it so people can laugh at me, but I digress. All right. We really have to wrap things up. I've got a lot going on. There's a lot of different directions we can go with this, Mike, but we're going to wrap things up right now. It is, I'm guessing well over an hour with our podcast. We will be back more regularly. I got to talk minors with you because there's some really interesting names. But I'm going to end it with this. I'm going old school here, Mike. Anything you'd like to plug? You haven't written in a while. However, that's our site. We have lives. Anything site related, non-site related you'd like to plug?
Well, I would say that Jim's piece, your piece on Danny Salazar is must read. And I really think that, Jim has this sort of creative, sort of futuristic piece about, an innovative way to lessen the adverse impacts of the Indians bullpen that I think is a really fun idea and will be a really fun read, and that's going to come out
next week's corner, which will be Monday or Tuesday.
I'm going to have a piece rolling out. I'm saying this on air to impose a requirement upon myself. But I'm going to have a piece coming out on minor leaguers who I think have really improved their stock by using sort of some advanced statistics that can be predictive of future performance. So that'll be coming out in the next 4 or 5 days.
That'll be a good segue because we've got to talk we got Madden in here and talk some minor league stuff. There's lots of really fun names that are out there. Some I like, some I don't. Some that are old, some that are young. These old guys that are old for their leagues, I'm getting sick of them, but that's just me. 2 things to plug. One is Brian McPeak. If you don't know Brian, if you don't remember Brian, you probably know him, just have forgotten. Brian, of course, wrote for the Cleveland Fan, ran the Cleveland Fan, was their top editor there for a while. He is covering our NBA Finals at EHC and some fantastic pieces. I know we're not known for our basketball coverage, but we do actually cover some basketball stuff. That's what our sites, I guess, compare it to Ringer in the Cleveland sense. Some really good stuff. I'm going to put that all together on a link at the top of our site. Starting when you hear this podcast, you'll be able to go there and click it. It's the NBA Finals Diary by McPeak. That's 1. 2. When this is released sometime late tonight or in the morning, it will be draft day, and you'd be silly not to follow our former colleague at IBI, who's now the major scout guy at scout.com, and that's Jeff Ellis, who is busier than all get out, but we'll have the draft, not only the Indians draft covered, but the entire draft. So follow him on Twitter. If you got questions, shoot them to him. He's going to be busy this week, but he will get to them eventually. So make sure you follow Jeff Ellis's coverage. And Mike, I think we'll maybe try to pull him in a week or so and talk Indians draft and see what he thinks. Might be another good segue into our draft coverage. But Mike, it's been real, man. It's almost like we're new friends. I forgot what you look like, and you covered your face up with this pretty little EHC like diagram there. I'm sad that I didn't get to see you more.
Merry Christmas.
Merry freaking Christmas. All right, on that note, we're going to wrap things up here with EHC 53. Tune in to our podcast on SoundCloud. Tune into our podcast on iTunes. And those of you that haven't visited in a while, visit again. Tell your friends. Tell your moms and dads and aunts and uncles and guardians and, your pets that we're back. And we'll be back for a while and then probably disappear again, but we're always here. And to the 3 people who begged us to podcast, there you go. We gave you a lot. All right. On that note, we're going to wrap things up. Go Cleveland. Go Cavs. We'll see you soon. Bye, Mike.